talk about Claude Fable 5. Now, this model has been recently released, and so let's dive into the details. So, this model has been released and handed out into the public. It is the first one of its class. It is related to the essentially the tier that sits above the Opus class in terms of raw capability. Under the hood, it's basically the same as Mythos 5, and it is unique in that it has additional safeguards and things that are in place. So this is kind of new. In addition to this, it is tuned for more long, complex task, multi-stage activities that before were really not possible with your standard quick chatbot replies. In terms of benchmarking, it is roughly 10% above the most recent Opus 4.8. And in terms of passing of the model test, it is roughly 90% accurate as it relates to the specific evaluations that these models come through. And its really focus is around the harder the task, the more it can do and the more accurate it can become from that perspective. So this model is different in that it can work for multiple days, right? And it can basically do the work on its own. And in addition to that, it has some self-checking capabilities that it is able to check and guard itself. From that perspective, that is helpful. And then that also helps with accuracy from that perspective. In some of the recent highlights, it was able to do roughly 50 million lines of Ruby code migrated in one day, something that it would have taken many months from that perspective is able to do task within a day. So that is super compression. And so as it relates to token efficiency and those sorts of things, it's able to do task with less tokens, which is going to be a reduction in significant cost from that perspective. So that is a real plus. And some analysis as it relates to different sorts of things. So we all know the complexities around finance as it relates to numbers and charts, tables and documents. So it's able to do a lot of this deep research as it relates to not only finance, but trading. So we also know the complexities around trading, and it was able to ace the evaluations as it relates to trading, root cause, and expected value reasoning. And then we also know the complexities around legal and aspects of legal that are super important. And it was able to handle red line edits basically better than a human would be able to do. And if you've ever read a contract, if you've ever done any red line edits, you know how much back and forth there is and how tedious it can be. So obviously it can accelerate legal things from that perspective and really step up above as it relates to red line edits, just as one example. And we all know essentially, especially with some of the older models, how it struggled in reading screenshots and doing things from that perspective. It wasn't always accurate, but it could basically take screenshots and then basically check the code against those screenshots and make sure that things were accurate and correct from that perspective. Not only that, but it can read really dense diagrams and tables that are buried within PDFs. We all know how tedious that can be from that perspective. And then we're all familiar with Pokemon. So it was basically able to beat Pokemon based on screenshots and being able to check that within the accuracy perspective. Memory is also another important aspect of how these AI models are used. It was basically within a certain test was able to have a 3x memory payoff compared to the most recent Opus 4.8. And they actually put it through a test with Slay the Spire test, and it was able to beat that basically 3 times as much as the most recent Opus 4.8 model. Some things that it basically was able to build mostly unprompted. I know that there were some prompts involved, but it was able to build a solar system simulation. It was able to do basically build a CAD system, and it was not only able to build it, but it was also able to design it from that perspective. It was able to play a game called Factorio and build the strategy, and it also built a simulation related to music. So these are just a few of the examples that it was able to do from that perspective. And some of the people that essentially got it first, so we all know Cursor, and so was able to kind of integrate with Cursor. Not only that, but it also was able to be leveraged first with GitHub. There was another scoring model that Devin was able to use. I'm not exactly sure what cognition is, but they were able to use it. And another finance partner was able to do the 90% evaluation, and it was basically 10% above that from that perspective. So that is a significant improvement over previous models. So we talked a little bit about safeguards, making sure that these safeguards in place. Not only that, but making sure that these researchers also are vetting these things to make sure that it was accurate. Just a few examples here. There was a faster drug design step, so 10x it, and that's a pretty significant number. And then scientists were also able to hypothesize accuracy within 80% on these blind tests. And those are pretty significant numbers as it relates to that. And then we've got guardrails, specific guardrails that were mentioned as it relates to this, focus on cybersecurity, biology and chemistry, and model distillation. Not only that, but it survived over 1,000 hours of bug bounty testing with no universal jailbreaking found. And then it also did a new 30-day data retention policy on this tier. And so you can see these guardrails and then the accuracy that is in place as it relates to that. That is pretty important to make sure that these guardrails, and more importantly, that the accuracy is in place. And then in terms of cost, it roughly cost $10 for 1 million token inputs, and then $50 for 1 million token outputs. And it is able to roughly double Opus 4.8, and it's less than half the price of Mythos Preview. So that is a significant discount. In terms of where we can get it, you can get it through the Claude apps, the API, AWS, Bedrock, Google Cloud. It also is free on the Pro, the Max, and the Team and the Enterprise through June 22nd. And then it shifts to basically usage credits while the capacity continues to scale. So really the bottom line, this isn't really a faster chatbot. It's more of an autonomous coworker. So it focuses on days long activities, self checking, agentic work. So this capability is significant, and it shifts the focus around from prompting, and it's more about doing long-term work. It's knowing when to hand off these things and then review what has been accomplished from that perspective. So I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation today. I'm going to be having more presentations as it relates to some of these learning models as they come out. And if you like this, put some comments in. Let me know what you think about this presentation. And definitely subscribe to the QA Revolution channel. And I will talk to you later. Bye.